Hi, I'm Murtuza Ali from Counterpoint Research and attending the Here Directions in Frankfurt. I've had an amazing couple of days, and with me I have a special guest, Andrei, who's Director of Industry Solutions at Here. We've had some amazing sessions this morning on software-defined vehicles, of which Andrei actually ran a panel. And so I'd like Andrei to start with providing some more background on how Here is involved with software-defined vehicles.
Yeah, thank you, Murtuza. First of all, thank you for having us at our largest customer event of the year. And to answer your question, the industry automotive is changing, and many more functions, many more applications are becoming software-defined in the vehicle. But what ourselves, we realize that still the purpose of the car is to take you from location A to location B. So the SDV use cases, the most complex to engineer, are the ones that work with location. So from this perspective, we had a look at, let's say, the ecosystem of what's happening in the need of the customers, and thought, how do we need ourselves, to make it easier for the new developers to integrate location in their SDV projects?
That's great. And if I ask you, the SDV Accelerator that we heard about this morning, how is Here involved with this SDV Accelerator, and what role does AWS play within that as well?
Yeah, great question. So we announced this year at CES, parts of it also at the EAM in Munich. We made a big announcement. So the SDV Accelerator is a new initiative to make it easier for OEMs and partners also to come together in software ecosystems for digital cockpit and ADAS. From this perspective, we are the location backbone. So we are providing the location assets, let's say the software, the SDKs, and the integration from the platform backends in the virtual environment that's being developed. AWS, if you want to call it, it's a bit of the force multiplier, because they bring their infrastructure, they bring their reference architectures, they bring their reference code, and also together a marketplace for multiple partners to actually come together and make this as easy as let's say, as fitting puzzle pieces for the automotive developers in setting up their own desired digital cockpits.
And you talked about these partners as well, which are part of the S2 Accelerator. Can you elaborate a bit more on their role and maybe perhaps give a couple of examples of how they're adding value to this whole accelerator alongside Here?
Yeah, so first of all, SDV, it's a true, let's say, collaborative effort. It's not just one player that says, okay, I'm bringing it from A to Z. So from this perspective, we want to enable these partners to come together and make it easy for OEMs, to come like pick and choose. The SDV Accelerator is on purpose open. So from this perspective, we here and AWS are the founding members, but the list of partners and the partners can join. If they see the benefits, if there's requirement for OEMs, new partners can always come in. So that's one of the key principles for it. To give you a couple of examples that we have, so basically there's QNX, and QNX brings the real-time operating system that can run actually natively in the cloud from the virtualized ECUs on AWS infrastructure. So that makes it very simple, just to kind of like simulate the same real-time operating system in the cloud as in the vehicle. So that's an example. The other examples I could maybe name, let's say Panasonic, and they're bringing the so-called the V-Skipgen, which is a virtual kind of like digital cockpit, which is already, let's say, virtualized, and OEMs can use it as a reference for testing and implementation. Electrobit also is a trusted partner of ours, and brings AutoSAR software and other tools that are running natively on AWS to facilitate CI/CD and continuous development of software.
I think this is very interesting because the partners that you talk about are actually quite strong partners that are there and well established. So I guess the people who want to use the SDV Accelerator are not looking at fringe players; they're looking at mainstream players actually being part of the SDV Accelerator. With Here, Electrobit, QNX, Panasonic, they all being big in their own spaces. So that's very interesting, actually. If I ask you about the goals that Here wants to achieve with SDV Accelerator, and also how is Here putting itself in the center of the whole exercise?
Yeah. So the first, I would say, our strategy is basically based on two major goals. I would say it's not just one goal, there's multiple goals. So the first is to accelerate time to market. Quite often in automotive, we talk about platforms that are planned for the next 5 years. And, this doesn't keep up with the technological progress that happens everywhere in the world. So we have to reduce development time. We have to use, to modernize the development and compress it. And a part of it is also the testing and the validation that happens for a system. It's not just, let's say you've done it. Most of developing a new system for automotive is how can you validate, how can you test in pre-SOP. And the way the more efficient you do this, the better, helps you compress and keep timelines and costs under control. So that's the first thing. But the second thing, and maybe this comes in the second phase, we are not looking only at pre-SOP, we're also looking at post-SOP, because we see that development of a digital cockpit, of a navigation application, you name it, should not stop at SOP and just get some updates. It should continue with new features.
Yeah.
And the same SDV Accelerator could also be used down the line in the life cycle to say, hey, there are new capabilities, there are new features. How do they work? How do they work on our systems? And is there any incompatibility? How it may actually work on different variations of the same platform that might be in different regions where we're testing different features? So it's all about, this fluidizing this software development and CI/CD just to, let's say, to keep up with the modern practices in software. Automotive is kind of embracing this, people coming from mobile space and working, they know that this transition has happened a couple of years, but that's the only way that you can keep, in this SDV, in this SDV new world to keep up with the processes. And very important, that's something that, we probably heard it in our keynote, in our panel, think more about the outcomes rather than the technology and kind of like the pre-integration. That's a key part of it. We see quite often many of the efforts in building a automotive grade, let's say, digital cockpit. There's a lot of pre-integration work, and that's kind of like takes away the, the innovation and the energy and adds to the timeline. So overall, that's what our goals.
And I think that's quite a fundamental and profound thing that you've touched upon, where the new OEM automaker entrants, especially in China, are absolutely doing this approach where they believe in outcomes rather than the process and the technology taking you to it. And I think some of the legacy OEMs are stuck too much in the process zone and delaying their outcomes through it. So I think it's a great initiative that you can bring this forward in terms of testing that allows a rollout of a lot of these features on time by enabling this. So that's amazing. If I ask you a little bit more wider questions from an OEM perspective, a lot of legacy OEMs are now kind of progressing on their SDV journey. There are different phases. How do you see them progressing in this transition? And what are the kind of key steps you believe they should be aware or take that enables this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a very good question. And, it's clear that if you look at the global spectrum of OEMs, they're not all operating in the same space. And I think there's also various phases, of you can, let's say, be in a connected phase, then you can be towards adaptive, towards, let's say, AI-enabled, AI-agentic phase. It's a long spectrum of where you can be on the SDV development scale. But what's clear is that even in the current spectrum, some OEMs, especially the ones that don't bring the legacy, and there are some new players that actually have close connections with tech companies, or even, come from mobile space, some of the developers and so on. They already have some, they're already quite advanced on this journey, and they work in a virtualized ways and everything. They're much more aligned on the outcomes and less in the silos, and everything is much more dynamic. You can see this also, how quickly they can develop certain cars versus, I would say, OEMs that have a legacy. They have multiple platforms, they have multiple departments of engineers that are not so fast into it. So that's the two speed that the industry is. Now, as an advice, or maybe as a key takeaways, how you can catch up with this, probably the SDV transformation is not like a 0 to 100 over time. You have to, or let's say overnight. It just happens, maybe let's say pick a few use cases. Some of the use cases that we're showing in the SDV Accelerator is that let's start with a map customization. Let's start with fine-tuning your EV routing models in an environment, right? Before you're actually able to do the entire digital cockpit and virtualize it and experiment with it. So have this kind of like, let's say, incremental approach. The second point, and this goes into where you said about heroes' roles and why we believe that, why actually we engage in this initiative. It makes it easier if you're looking at a unified representation of the world, if you have a unified map stack that powers your, let's say, your AI, your navigation functions, your ADAS, now also your custom assistants, right? You've seen in the architecture that AI is also another pillar in automotive next to navigation and AI. At the end of the day, you know, they all interact and they operate on the same roads and provide experience in the physical world. So starting with a unified representation of it is important. So this would be, I would say, a second takeaway. We see quite often, and we, let's say, some of our executives talk about this fragmentation where you have lots of bits of pieces and many vehicles that have like up to 7 or 8 maps. Of course, that makes it difficult, right? Because it requires extra validation and
duplication of efforts as well.
Exactly. So if things are pre-integrated and unified from the source, it's much easier from the OEM, you know, to focus on differentiator rather than making the parts fit together.
Yeah. That's again, you know, the first point there as well was quite important, because you discussed that how you already have some use cases already within the accelerator that allows the OEM to actually define their features, you know, take advantage of it and say, okay, what can be the possibility. So that's, I think, very important part of the accelerator. And the fact that you, like you mentioned in the previous discussion, that it's not just limited to pre-production or SOP. You're kind of continuing the journey beyond the production or SOP. So no, Andrei, that was a brilliant take on SDV and how here's kind of center stage, or taking the initiative to be center stage of this initiative, and kind of helping the legacy OEM makers to kind of move on their journey. So very much appreciated. Wish you all the best. And thank you for your time. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. Always a pleasure, Murtuza.